Nobody talks about this part. There's a phase in investing that doesn't look like progress, doesn't feel like progress, and doesn't give you any emotional feedback that you're doing the right thing. It's not exciting enough for social media, not painful enough to feel like failure, and not rewarding enough to feel like success. It just sits there, quietly, stretching on for years. And most people quit right here. When people imagine investing, they picture either fast wins or dramatic losses. Big green days, big red days, stories that make sense in hindsight. What they don't picture is the long middle stretch where nothing obvious happens. No breakthroughs, no visible payoff, just repetition. That's the phase nobody warns you about because there's nothing flashy to say. There's no hook, no trick, no lesson that fits into a caption. But this phase is where almost all real outcomes are decided. When I first started investing, I thought patience meant waiting through volatility. I thought the hard part would be watching my portfolio drop and not panicking. I prepared myself emotionally for crashes, for fear, for moments where I'd have to stay strong and not sell. What I wasn't prepared for was boredom. Months where I invested consistently and nothing seemed to change. Years where my balance went up, then down, then sideways, and ended almost exactly where it started. Long stretches where I was technically doing everything right, but had nothing to show for it that felt meaningful. No one tells you that this is normal. Instead, you're surrounded by stories of people who seem to skip this part entirely. Someone doubles their money in crypto. Someone starts a business and sells it in 2 years. Someone posts screenshots of returns that make your steady progress feel pointless by comparison. So you start questioning yourself. Am I too conservative? Am I missing something? Is my strategy outdated? Should I be doing more? That questioning is what kills most people's long-term plans. Not fear, not greed, uncertainty during quiet. The quiet phase usually starts after the initial excitement wears off. In the beginning, everything feels new. You're learning, you're setting things up, you're watching numbers change for the first time. Even small gains feel meaningful because they're proof that something is happening. Then, time passes. Your contributions become routine. Your strategy becomes familiar. The novelty disappears. And suddenly, investing feels like a background task instead of a journey. This is where expectations collide with reality. Most people secretly expect investing to feel productive. They expect some sense of momentum, some signal that their effort is paying off. But investing doesn't work like that, especially not early on. Compounding is backloaded. The progress you're making today doesn't show up today. It stacks invisibly, waiting for scale and time to do their work together. That's easy to understand intellectually. It's much harder to live through emotionally. There were periods where I did everything by the book. Consistent contributions, reasonable diversification, long-term mindset, and still felt like I was standing still. I wasn't losing money. I wasn't making mistakes, but I wasn't feeling richer either. That's the quiet phase, and it's dangerous because it creates the illusion that nothing matters yet, that your actions aren't significant, that you could stop for a while and it wouldn't change much. So people stop. They pause contributions. They start tinkering. They chase something more interesting. They look for strategies that promise movement because movement feels like progress. Often, they don't even realize they've quit. They just drift away from consistency. The quiet phase doesn't scare people out of investing. It bores them out of it. What makes this phase especially hard is that it often overlaps with the busiest, most demanding years of life. Careers are growing, expenses are rising, families are forming, time feels scarce. You're being asked to sacrifice money today for a future version of yourself that feels abstract and distant. while the present is loud and demanding. And the payoff is invisible. No applause, no confirmation, no sense of arrival. Just discipline without dopamine. That's why so many people rationalize stopping. They tell themselves they'll restart later, when income is higher, when life is calmer, when things feel more stable. Later rarely comes. Another problem with the quiet phase is that it doesn't align with how we're trained to measure success. We're conditioned to look for short feedback loops. Work harder, get paid. Study more, get better grades. Train more, get stronger. Investing breaks that pattern. You can do everything right and see no immediate reward. In fact, the better you do it, the quieter it often feels. This creates a psychological mismatch. Your brain wants feedback, and investing refuses to give it. So the brain looks for feedback elsewhere. Checking your portfolio more often doesn't help. It usually makes things worse. You start reacting to noise. Small fluctuations feel meaningful when they're not. You start narrating every move as if it means something about your future. Most of the time, it doesn't. The quiet phase is also where comparison becomes most toxic. When your own progress feels slow, other people's highlights feel louder. You don't see their quiet phases. You only see moments when something finally worked or when they decide to share a win. You don't see the years where nothing happened for them either. So you assume you're behind. And that assumption slowly erodes your confidence, even if your strategy is solid. I've seen people abandon perfectly reasonable plans because they didn't feel special enough. Not because they were failing, but because they were ordinary. Ordinary is not a failure in investing. It's often a requirement. The quiet phase is where habits matter more than ideas, where consistency matters more than insight, where not changing your mind matters more than being clever. It's where the difference between people who build something and people who keep starting over quietly emerges. One of the hardest lessons I learned was that progress in investing is not linear in experience. You don't feel a little richer every year. You often feel exactly the same for a long time, and then different all at once. That delay messes with people. Humans are bad at waiting for nonlinear outcomes. We underestimate how long nothing will happen, and overestimate how fast things will change once they do. So we give up right before the curve bends. Another thing nobody warns you about is how the quiet phase can make you doubt your identity. When you're not actively doing something, it's easy to feel passive, to feel like you're not in control. People who are used to effort equaling progress struggle with this. They want to optimize, adjust, improve. But often, the correct move during the quiet phase is to do less, not more. Hold, repeat, wait. That sounds simple. It's not. Doing nothing intentionally is one of the hardest skills to develop, especially when the world is constantly telling you to act, react, and engage. The financial industry doesn't help here either. Activity generates fees. Movement generates content. Stillness generates nothing for them. So you're constantly exposed to messages that imply something should always be happening, that smart investors are always adjusting, that staying engaged means staying ahead. In reality, most wealth is built by people who made a few good decisions and then got out of their own way. The quiet phase is also where emotional discipline shows up in subtle ways. Not in moments of panic, but in moments of doubt. Doubt that your effort matters. Doubt that the sacrifice is worth it. Doubt that you're choosing the right path. It's much easier to stay calm during a crash than to stay committed during stagnation. Crashes feel temporary. Stagnation feels permanent. But stagnation is often just compounding warming up. The irony is that the quiet phase often looks identical to failure from the inside. The difference is only visible much later. That's why it's so dangerous to judge your strategy based on how it feels in this phase. Feelings are delayed, results are delayed, everything is delayed. You're operating without feedback. That's not a bug, it's the design. The people who get through this phase don't do anything heroic. They don't suddenly discover some secret. They don't become more motivated. They just don't quit. They accept that boredom is part of the process, not a signal that something is wrong. They stop expecting investing to entertain them. They build lives full enough that investing doesn't need to. That shift matters more than people realize. When investing stops being the main source of stimulation, it becomes easier to let it work quietly in the background. This is where automation becomes powerful, not just mechanically, but psychologically. Removing daily decisions reduces the urge to interfere, reduces the temptation to look for action. It creates distance between you and the noise. The quiet phase also teaches humility. You realize how little control you have over short-term outcomes, how much randomness exists, how small your individual actions feel in the moment. That humility is uncomfortable, but it's stabilizing. It stops you from overreacting. It stops you from assuming every outcome is a verdict on your intelligence. Over time, something interesting happens. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop needing proof every month that you're on track. Your confidence becomes quieter too. Not loud optimism, quiet trust. Trust in the process, not because it feels good, but because you understand it. And then, usually without warning, the phase ends. Not with fireworks, not with an announcement. Just gradually, numbers start behaving differently. Contributions matter more. Growth accelerates. The same actions produce noticeably different results. The work didn't change. Time did. Looking back, it's obvious that the quiet phase was doing most of the heavy lifting. It just didn't look like it. That's why nobody warns you. It's hard to explain something that feels like nothing. But if there's one thing worth internalizing, it's this. The quiet phase is not a mistake. It's not a sign you're behind. It's not something to escape. It's the price of admission. If you expect it, you can survive it. If you respect it, you can benefit from it. If you misunderstand it, it will quietly push you off course. The goal isn't to make investing exciting. Excitement is usually expensive. The goal is to make it boring enough that you don't sabotage it. Because the quiet phase doesn't reward attention. It rewards endurance. And almost everything that matters in investing is decided there, long before it looks like anything happened at all.